what are the categories of small things, small biological things in this world that can kill us humans? Let's look. You said like most viruses are friendly, or at least not unfriendly.
Right.
But let's look at the unfriendly ones in viruses and bacteria and those kinds of things. When you look at the full spectrum of things that can kill you, can you kind of paint a brief picture?
Yeah, I think the big picture is that the things that can kill you are a minority of everything that's out there. And we're talking about molecules. So we have in us proteins that can kill us.
Yeah.
Prions that are just, it's a protein in us. And if it misfolds, it makes all of its other copies misfold. And then you die of a neurological disease.
Yeah.
That's pretty rare. So there are proteins, there are viruses. And as I said, only certain ones can kill us. But even though if we get those from animals, it's not straightforward. If you look at SARS-CoV-2, right, this is probably a once in 100-year pandemic, I would say, equivalent to 1918 in its devastation. And in between, there have been smaller pandemics of other viruses, but it doesn't happen all that often. So we have a lot of viruses. We have a lot of bacteria of various sorts that can cause infections in us. And it's a limited number, right? Your streptococci and staphylococci and clostridia. We could go on. But we know how to handle those as long as we have antimicrobials. It's just that we abuse them and we get resistance. So that can be a problem. Then we have fungi, not mushrooms, but much smaller fungi that multiply submicroscopic or just at the microscopic level. They can, in dry climates of the U.S., you can inhale their spores and they can grow in your lung if you're immunosuppressed and so forth. So those are the tiny guys. And then we have parasites, which we do this week in parasitism, where single cells, even worms of various sorts, can invade you and cause all sorts of problems.
I was like kind of terrified to listen to that podcast. What's it like?
Well, I mean, what you learn is that you travel somewhere and you can get infected and bring it back home.
Yes.
Here in the U.S., we do have certain kinds of parasites, but because of our lifestyle, we more or less have avoided them. For example, there is a parasite called Toxoplasma, which is infected most of the world, actually, because a lot of people like to eat raw meat, and you would get it from raw meat. And we're not as fond of that here in the U.S. We like to cook our meat, but that could be a consequence of eating raw meat.
Is that what leads to, what is it called, Toxoplasmosis?
Yeah, so Toxoplasmosis, it's mainly a big issue is if you're pregnant and you get toxo, then your fetus is going to be very badly malformed. It's going to have brain defects and so forth. And animals can get it as well. So there are a lot of parasites of that nature, which you often acquire by food, eating food of different sorts. And it usually happens elsewhere. We just, on This Week in Parasitism, we do a case. So Daniel Griffin is our resident physician. He's a doctor, a real doctor, right? And every month he comes up with a case. Okay, this is a person I saw. And last month, this young lady had traveled somewhere and she ate raw fish. It was somewhere Southeast Asia or something, and she ended up with red bumps all over her skin. And it turned out it was a parasite from the fish that moved around in her, and very easy to cure. You have the right doctors and the right drugs, you can cure all these.
What about diagnose? Like connect the red spots to the fact that it's a parasite.
It's very easy if you have the right diagnostics. Now, Daniel often goes to parts of the world where they don't have diagnostics, and he has to use other mechanisms. He may have to take a bit and look at it under a microscope, and then he may not be able to get the drug depending on where he is. But often he sees patients who come back to the U.S. and they get diarrhea or they have a fever, and he said, "Where have you been?" And he can put two and two together. And so we let our listeners do that, and they all send in guesses, and it's wonderful to hear them go through this. So there are a lot of parasites
solve the puzzle and solve the
that
case
can
study.
get you. You have to be careful about eating when you go overseas.
And water too.
Water as well. And, in parts of Africa, there are parasites in the lakes. And if you go swimming, they can invade you. And in fact, they can go into your hair follicles and burrow in and get into your bloodstream.
That's exciting.
So Daniel is interesting because he's very adventurous and he's not afraid of any of this. So there's a famous lake in Africa, Lake Malawi, which harbors a lot of these parasites. And he said, "Oh yeah, I just make sure I towel off vigorously when I get out and get rid of them." And that was the name of an episode. But food
Towel
is
off vigorously.
sushi. You can get worms from sushi,
Yeah.
and the solution is to freeze it. And many sushi restaurants now have liquid nitrogen. They snap freeze their sushi, and that kills all the parasites. And a study was actually done in Japan showing that freezing does not alter the taste of sushi because it's up. You see a big industry there.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.